In today's true crime feature, we're exploring two unusual and authentic criminal cases. The first tale is about four teenage friends who go camping for the night on the shoreline of an idyllic lake. As the sun rises the next morning, only one has survived, barely. While our second story delves into an annual carnival celebration, a call girl was murdered in her apartment, and the blood drained from her body, leading to the case being cited as proof of vampires. Our channel is committed to uncovering such narratives with fresh content released 3 times a week. If these stories pique your interest, please consider liking and subscribing to help my channel grow. Now let's get into today's enthralling tale. Alright, let me take you back to a summer in 1960 in Finland. Nils Gustafsson, who's just 18 years old, setting off for a lakeside camping trip with his girlfriend, Malia, and 2 close friends. They were heading to Lake Bodom, a spot known for its quiet beauty. Not far from the hustle of Helsinki, Nils, full of youthful anticipation, couldn't have imagined the horror that awaited them. Malia, just 15, and her friend Anya, also 15, were joined by Anya's boyfriend Scipio, another 18-year-old. They were looking for a night under the stars, a break from their everyday lives. But as the early summer night fell, their idyllic getaway turned into a scene straight out of a nightmare. In the dead of the night, between 4 and 6 in the morning, something unthinkable happened. Malia, Anya, and Scipio were attacked viciously. They didn't stand a chance. They were beaten, stabbed, their young lives snuffed out in a blink, and Niles, he was left battered. His face broken, his body pierced by multiple stab wounds. Found outside the tent, he was the sole survivor of this carnage. But his memories of the night were lost in a haze of trauma. Neil spoke of a fleeting, chilling image, a man with red eyes, clad in black, a specter in the night. But was this a fragment of a shattered memory, or just a figment of his imagination? Now let me paint the scene of Lake Bodom for you. It's a gray expanse of water, framed by trees, a stone throw away from Helsinki. A popular spot, but on that fateful night in June, it became something else. Nils and his friends had come to escape, to laugh, and live without care. But as dawn broke on the 5th of June, their tent lay in ruins. A group of boys, out early for bird watching, stumbled upon this horror. They saw a man, blond and airy, walking away from the chaos. And at 11 in the morning, a local, Esko Johansson, found the gruesome scene. Nils barely alive, and his friends lifeless. The police arrived, questions swirling. By answers, those were scars. And now 60 years later, those questions remain, hanging in the air like a thick fog. What really happened at Lake Bodom that night? The brutality of that night at Lake Bodom was beyond comprehension. Malia, Nils' girlfriend, bore the brunt of this savage attack. Her body found on top of a crumbled tent told a tale of unthinkable violence. She had been stabbed over 30 times, many of these wounds inflicted post-mortem. The horror didn't end there. Anya and Scipio, the other 2 teens, were also victims of this frenzied assault. They were found inside the tent, their bodies bearing the marks of multiple stabbings and blunt force trauma. In Nils, he was discovered near Malia, his forehead stabbed, his facial bones shattered. When the police arrived, Nils was clinging to life, a faint pulse amid the carnage. The investigators pieced together a chilling sequence. The killer had approached stealthily, slicing the tent ropes. The fabric collapsed, ensnaring the teens in their temporary shelter. Then in a terrifying frenzy, the assailant leaped on top of the tent, stabbing blindly, relentlessly. Nils and Malia somehow managed to crawl outside, which explained their location. But why was Malia half naked? It was suggested she might have been undressing with Nils when the attack happened. No evidence of sexual assault was found on any of the victims, deepening the mystery of the motive. In a disturbing twist, after the murders, the killer ripped through the tent. Wallets, personal items, even clothing were taken. Some of Neil's belongings were discarded far from the scene, while others vanished without trace. The theft seemed opportunistic, perhaps an attempt to disguise the real motive or delay the identification of the victims. The motorbike's keys stolen were left untouched, but the investigation was marred from the start. The crime scene wasn't secured properly. Police, onlookers, even soldiers trampled all over the evidence, obliterating crucial details. The lack of control, the contamination of the site, it all added layers of confusion and lost opportunities in the question for answers. The mystery deepened with the sighting of a blond man walking away from the tent around 6 a.m. The boys who saw him gave a description to the police, leading to the first suspect, Carl Walmer Gilstrom, a kiosk keeper with a notorious reputation. Gilstrom, despite his livelihood depending on tourists, was known for his hostility towards them. Locals whispered about his aggression, his habit of cutting down tents, hurling stones at unwanted visitors. Blond, tall, with a fighter's stance, he seemed likely a suspect. Yet the police found nothing tying him to the crime scene. But then 5 days later after the murders, Gilstrom was seen pouring concrete into a well in his garden. The rumors swirled. Was he hiding the murder weapon, the stolen items? Despite these suspicions, the well remained unexamined, and police dogs found nothing on his property. Gilstrom, a groundsman, seemed to benefit from a neighbor's overactive imagination. His alibi, his wife, who initially claimed he was home all night. However, 9 years later, Gilstrom drowned himself in Lake Bodom, following an alleged confession to a neighbor that he was the killer. After his death, his wife admitted she had lied about the alibi, having been threatened by him. Still, despite these revelations, the well went unexcavated. The suspicion around Gilstrom unexplored. Let's shift to another suspect. Tied to a murder 7 years earlier, in 1953, 70-year-old Kailik Sari was murdered in Iskojik, far from Lake Bodom. Among the suspects was Hans Assmann, a former KGB agent. On the night of Sari's disappearance, he was seen in the area, and later he confessed to being involved, claiming it was an accidental death he disguised as murder. Now, why does this matter for the Bodom case? Because Assmann lived near Lake Bodom at the time of the murders. The day after the tragedy, he showed up at Helsinki Hospital, bloodied, disheveled, dirt under his fingernails, and despite the suspicious appearance, Assmann had an alibi. He was supposedly in Germany when the murders occurred. As the years rolled on, other suspects emerged in the Lake Bodom mystery. There was Pauli Luma, spotted near the campsite, though he had an alibi placing him in another town. And then there was Pentti Sunninen, an unknown criminal who confessed to the murders while in jail for other crimes. But none of these confessions held up. None of these people could be placed at Lake Bodom on that fateful night, except one, Niels Gustafsson, the sole survivor. He lived a seemingly normal life for over 40 years after the tragedy. He married, had children, but the shadow of the suspicion never really lifted. In 2004, a bombshell. Niels was arrested. The evidence, his shoes found far from the crime scene, were utterly blood-free, unlike the shoes of the other victims. The Finnish National Bureau of Investigation painted a grim picture. Niels then claimed had slaughtered his friends in a fit of rage, then staged his own injuries. The motive, they suggested, was jealousy or anger, sparked by a rejected sexual proposition in the tent. But in 2005, the court found these theories unsustained. Niels, battered and broken that night, couldn't have mustered the strength to commit such brutal acts. The defense argued the idea that he could self-inflict such severe wounds and orchestrate a cover-up was deemed impossible. Niels walked free, acquitted of all charges. And then there's the Beast of Bodom theory. A pillow found at the scene, tainted with semen, hinted at another presence. Though this was later dismissed, but one chilling detail persisted. Under hypnosis, Niels described a man with red eyes, blonde hair, and black clothing. This description bore a striking resemblance to Hans Assmann. reinforcing his status as a prime suspect. And then a haunting photograph from one of the victims' funerals revealed a man in the crowd, eerily similar to Neil's description, a man who was never identified, never found. The Lake Bodom murders remain a dark, unsolved chapter in Finnish history. It inspired metal bands, books, documentaries, and even films. The tale has woven itself into the fabric of Finnish culture, a cautionary tale told to children, a warning of the phantom of Lake Bodom, lurking in the shadows. And that's the eerie, unresolved saga of the Lake Bodom murders, a mystery that has haunted Finland for over 6 decades. Story 2. Next, let me take you back to the 1930s, in the heart of Sweden. Picture this. The streets are dimly lit and there's a chill in the air. It's a time when the mere mention of vampires would draw scoffs and eyes rolls. But in these very streets, something sinister was lurking. Something that would blur the lines between myth and reality. You see, for most folks, vampires were nothing but creatures of fiction, born from the wild imagination of writers and distorted by historical myths. But then, there were these who believed in existence as firmly as they believed in the person sitting next to them on a late-night bus ride. It's in this eerie backdrop that we come across certain individuals, killers who were so twisted that they were labeled as vampires. They didn't just kill, they drank the blood of their victims, sometimes even consumed parts of their bodies. It's a grisly thought, right? The difference between these real-life vampires and your run-of-the-mill cannibal was this morbid fascination with blood. Take for example Peter Curtin and Richard Trenton Chase. These were men whose names sent shivers down spines. They suffered from what's known as Renfield syndrome, a rare and chilling psychotic disorder. This condition drove them to a gruesome compulsion, the need to drink blood, sometimes directly, other times through the eating of organs. This wasn't just your average crime, it was something out of a horror story, a tale of madness intertwining with reality. But it wasn't just these infamous serial killers. There were others living among us who embraced a vampiric lifestyle. Not in a sinister way, they engaged in safe, blood-drawing practices, often with willing partners or donors. For them, consuming blood was about strength. Or maybe it was a fetish. Who knows? Now let's delve into the truly mysterious. The tale of the fictional vampire. Something that's tough to prove, right? But hold on. This is one case. An unsolved mystery that still sends chills down the spine of anyone who hears about it. It's known as the Alice Vampire Case. A story that begins with a prostitute in the cold, shadowy streets of 1930s Sweden. As the residents of Stockholm revealed in the Walpurgis night festivities on April 30th, 1932, something far more sinister was unfolding in the Alice area. Near Sankt Erksplan, picture this: bonfires lighting up the night sky, folks singing, the whole city's immersed in celebration. But in one apartment block, known to house several prostitutes, the atmosphere was different. Lily Lindstorm, a 32-year-old sex worker, had just paid her rent. She returned to her apartment to meet a client, oblivious to the horror that awaited her. This wasn't just any building. It was a place where the night's darkness met with the lights of those like Lily and her friend, 35-year-old Minnie Jansen, who sometimes worked as a prostitute. That evening, amidst the external merriment, Lily knocked on Minnie's door to borrow a condom, a common practice in their line of work. But later at 9 p.m., Lily appeared again, this time disabled, her body nude under a coat, asking for another condom because the first one had broken. Little did anyone know, this would be the last time anyone saw Lily alive. The next morning, when Minnie got no response from Lily's apartments, she thought her friend was still out, celebrating. But as the day passed and silence lingered, concern creeped in. On May 4th, 4 days after that fateful night, Minnie called the police. When the police arrived for a welfare check at Lily's apartment, they were met with a scene straight out of a nightmare. Lily's lifeless body lay face down on an ottoman, her head resting on her left arm. positioned in a way that suggested someone had carefully arranged her after her death. The cause? A brutal beating with a hard object, evidenced by a large wound on her head. The room was eerily orderly, her clothes folded next to her, a used condom in a place no one would ever want to find one. But the most chilling discovery was yet to come. During the autopsy, it was revealed that almost all of Lily's blood had been drained. The presence of a blood-stained soup, ladle, and traces of saliva on her neck and the body led to a horrific conclusion. Her killer had consumed her blood. This grisly discovery sent shockwaves through Stockholm. The media, seizing upon the morbid details, dubbed the perpetrator the Alice Vampire, a name that would echo through the annals of Unsolved Mysteries, a reminder of the night when the lines between myth and reality were terrifyingly blurred. The mystery deepened as the physician pieced together the tragic tale of Lily Lorstrom. He theorized that the fatal head wounds were likely inflicted by a small section of a lead pipe, striking her head from behind, but what stood out in the grim scenario was the blood, or the lack thereof. While some of it was consumed at the scene, as suggested by the eerie presence of the bloodstained ladle, there was this unnerving possibility that more blood might have been taken away, perhaps in small containers. Now, there was a belief that the massive head wound could explain the blood loss. However, the ladle, definitely not sustainable enough to be the murder weapon, hinted at a more sinister act. The reports were conflicting. Not all of Lily's blood was drained, contrary to what many believed, but what was undeniable was the brutality of the murder and the significant amount of blood that had left her body. Alvar Söderqvist, one of the investigators, later reflected on the case. He remarked on the killer's meticulously leaving not a single piece of evidence behind. No fingerprints, no hairs, not even a used drinking glass or even a cigarette. It was as if the killer had vanished into thin air, taking every possible clue with them. The police combed through Lily's apartment, leaving no stone unturned. Yet they found nothing. Interviews with the building's residents and searches of the surrounding area yielded no leads. The murder weapon, believed to have been brought and removed by the killer, remained a mystery, just like the identity of client Lily had seen that night. Lily's approach to her work was unusual for the 1930s in Sweden. Unlike most sex workers who were picked up on the streets, she invited clients into her home. This practice, a precursor to the modern system of in-house call girls and escorts, may have attracted a different kind of client, those who prefer discretion and anonymity. This twist in her professional method could have been what led to the fateful encounter with a client who preferred the shadows, a client who may have been harbored dark and deadly secrets. The mystery surrounding Lily Lindström's murder gradually receded into obscurity, turning into a minor detail in the historical records of 1930 Sweden. However, as time passed, the case reemerged, now recognized as one of the most notorious examples of a real-life vampire attack in history. So, did a vampire really take Lily's life? It's a question that hinges on what you're willing to believe. Is it the mythical bloodthirsty creature of lore, or is it something far more real and chilling? The monstrous capabilities of a human being. Sure, there was an unsettling amount of blood missing from Lily's body, but much of that could be attributed to the severe head wound. History has shown cases of clinical vampirism, like those of Curtin and Chase. This raises the possibility that Lily's killer might have been driven by a similar twisted thirst for blood. If true, it suggests a killer who might have struck again. Yet strikingly, no similar crime surfaced in Sweden during that era. The most baffling aspect, the complete lack of clues, save for the saliva found on Lily's neck and body. With the murder predating the era of DNA analysis, modern forensic techniques are of no use. Even though there are claims that the evidence is preserved at the Swedish Police Museum, who could the killer have been? A foreign visitor drawn to Stockholm's Walpurgis night festivities, or a local with a sinister agenda? Lily's routine and accessibility wouldn't have been hard to uncover. One theory points to a police officer skilled in erasing his presence from the crime scenes. Is it possible that the absence of evidence was in itself a clue? Another chilling hypothesis suggests a madman, lurking in the hidden spaces between the apartment walls, spying on the inhabitants. Maybe Lily caught him, leading to her tragic end. But then, there's that lingering, tantalizing question. What kind of vampire would use condoms? The story of the Alice vampires, intriguing as it is, leaves us with more questions than answers. What's indisputable is the tragic fate of Lily's Lindstrom, whose life was crucially cut short in her own apartment. And to this day, her murder remains an unsolved mystery, a cold case shrouded in the eerie unknown. Well, that wraps up today's episode. If you enjoyed today's stories and found it very valuable, please don't forget to hit the like button. Also consider subscribing to my channel and activate all notifications to ensure you don't miss any future uploads. Your support means a lot. Until next time, take care and see you soon.